Flight attendant mocked a black passenger. After spilling coffee on his baby, she didn't know he owned the sky. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. The cabin was quiet in that polished, artificial way only first class ever is. Soft lighting, cream leather seats, screens glowing with muted documentaries and paused movies, the kind of silence money buys. Then the coffee fell. It didn't drip. It spilled a sharp tilt of a porcelain cup, a sudden brown arc through the air before crashing down onto the tiny head cradled against a man's chest. A baby, pink sweater, small hands clenched. The child cried instantly, a high, piercing sound that sliced straight through the cabin's calm. The black man holding her stood up so fast his knees hit the table in front of him. His arm tightened around his baby, instinct over thought, pulling her away from the scalding liquid now soaking her curls and shoulder. Gasps rippled across the aisle. A woman 2 rows back covered her mouth. A man near the window already had his phone out, camera rolling, eyes wide. The flight attendant froze for half a second, just long enough for the moment to register, then her face twisted, not with concern but irritation. "Oh my God!" she snapped. "Sir, you need to control your child." The words hit harder than the coffee. The man looked down at his baby. His jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed along his temple. He checked her skin, whispering to her, rocking gently despite his own shaking hands. "She's burned," he said quietly, not shouting, not accusing, just stating a fact. The attendant exhaled sharply, like someone inconvenienced. "Well, you shouldn't have had her sitting up like that. This is a premium cabin, not a daycare." Premium cabin. A few heads turned. Someone muttered, "That's not okay." The phone cameras didn't stop. The man finally looked up. His eyes were steady, dark, controlled. But there was something else there, too. Memory, recognition. He'd seen this look before. Not just today. Years ago. Different places. Same tone. He didn't raise his voice. "I need ice. And I need medical assistance for my child," he said. The attendant crossed her arms. "Sir, calm down. You're making a scene." A scene. Coffee still dripped from the baby's hair onto the polished wood paneling. The child whimpered, her cries softer now, confused more than loud. Another passenger leaned into the aisle. She spilled it. "We all saw it." The attendant shot him a glare. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." But it did. Everyone felt it. The air in the cabin changed. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. The man adjusted his jacket around his daughter, shielding her, grounding himself. Inside, something old stirred an echo of being told to wait, to move, to explain himself when others never had to. He took a slow breath. "Please," he said again, still calm. "Get help." The attendant scoffed under her breath, already turning away. "I'll see what I can do," she muttered. "But if you can't keep things under control, we may need to relocate you." Relocate. The word hung there, heavy. The man didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply looked down at his child, then reached calmly into his pocket and took out his phone. And somewhere far beyond that cabin, beyond the clouds, systems were about to wake up. He stayed standing, his daughter pressed gently against his chest, her small cries fading into soft whimpers as he rocked her side to side. His hand moved slowly, deliberately, brushing damp curls away from her forehead, checking her skin again and again like he could undo the moment by sheer focus alone. Around him, first class shifted uncomfortably. People weren't sure where to look now, at the baby, at the attendant, or at the man who refused to explode the way they half expected him to. A few phones lowered. Others stayed up, steady, recording not just what happened, but what didn't. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't threaten. That, somehow, seemed to irritate her even more. The flight attendant returned with a stiff smile that never reached her eyes, a thin napkin and a single cup of lukewarm water in her hand, like an offering tossed without care. "This is all we have right now," she said curtly. You'll need to stay seated once things calm down. Stay seated. The man looked at her, really looked this time. He took in the pressed uniform, the gold pin, the practiced authority in her posture. He'd seen it before, the confidence that came from believing the rules would always bend in her favor. My child was burned, he said evenly. I'm not asking, I'm informing you. Her smile tightened. Sir, we're doing the best we can. But you chose to travel with an infant. These things happen. These things happen. A quiet murmur rolled through the cabin. A woman across the aisle shook her head slowly, disbelief written across her face. The man filming whispered, "Unreal," under his breath. The father adjusted his stance, shifting his weight so his daughter was more comfortable. His suit jacket, simple, dark, unbranded, was now stained with coffee, but he didn't seem to notice. His attention never left her. Inside, though, something else stirred. Not anger. Memory. He remembered another terminal years ago. Another uniform. Another voice telling him to step aside, to wait, to explain himself while others walked through without pause. He remembered holding his boarding pass too tightly, as if proof could be crushed into legitimacy. Back then, he hadn't had options. Back then, silence was survival. Now, silence was something else entirely. The attendant cleared her throat. Sir, if you continue to stand and disrupt the cabin, I'll have to call my supervisor. The word disrupt landed wrong. Heavy, loaded. He finally met her eyes again, calm but unyielding. I'm not the disruption, he said quietly. The coffee was. For a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then it hardened into something sharper. I need you to lower your voice, she replied, louder than necessary. You're in first class, not. She stopped herself. Too late. The sentence didn't finish, but it didn't need to. The implication hung in the air like turbulence no one could see. A man near the window leaned forward. What exactly are you implying? The attendant ignored him. Sir, she said, now fully clipped, if you can't comply, we can move you to another seat. Move you. The father exhaled slowly through his nose. His daughter had gone quiet now, exhausted, her small fingers curled into his shirt. He kissed the top of her head. Once. No, he said. Just that. One word. The cabin went still. She blinked. Excuse me? No, he repeated, calm as before. We'll stay right here. There was no challenge in his voice. No bravado. Just certainty. Her jaw tightened. She turned sharply on her heel. I'll be right back. As she walked away, the man finally glanced down at his phone again. The screen lit up briefly, reflecting in his eyes. He typed nothing dramatic. No rant, no threats. Just a message. Precise. Timed. Log this incident. Cabin 2A. Timestamp active. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and held his daughter closer. The plane continued to climb, unaware. But something else had already begun its ascent. The aisle didn't stay empty for long. Footsteps approached measured, authoritative, followed by the faint jingle of a badge. The lead flight attendant appeared beside the woman who had spilled the coffee, his expression already set before he even spoke. What seems to be the problem? He asked, though his eyes went straight past the baby and locked onto the man. The first attendant answered quickly, too quickly. Passenger is refusing to follow instructions. He's standing, causing a disruption. A disruption. The man didn't interrupt. He just listened, holding his daughter, her cheek pressed against his collarbone. Her breathing was shallow now, uneven, the kind that told him she was tired but not okay. She spilled hot coffee on my child, he said calmly when there was finally space to speak. I asked for ice and medical assistance. From this is Oles. The lead attendant glanced briefly at the baby, just a glance, then back at the man. Sir, accidents happen. Our crew is trained to handle situations professionally, but we need cooperation. Cooperation. A low murmur spread through the cabin again. The man with the phone shifted closer to the aisle, angling for a clearer shot. A woman across from him whispered, This is unbelievable. The first attendant folded her arms. He raised his voice, she said flatly. And now he's refusing to sit, to stay. The father tilted his head slightly. I haven't raised my voice once. Silence followed. Not denial, not apology, just silence. The lead attendant cleared his throat. Sir, regardless, standing during service is not permitted. If you're uncomfortable, we can reseat you in a quieter area. Quieter. Another word that didn't sit right. Why would I move? The man asked. His tone was steady, but the question landed like weight. We paid for these seats. That's a head. The lead attendant's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. First class is a shared space. We need to consider the comfort of other guests. Other guests. A man 2 rows back spoke up without waiting. We're fine. She's the one who spilled it. Heads nodded. A few people murmured agreement. The first attendant snapped her head around. Sir, this doesn't involve you. It does when you're lying, he replied. That did it. The lead attendant straightened, authority sliding fully into place. Okay, he said sharply. Let's de-escalate. Sir, please sit down. No, the father replied again. The word didn't rise. It didn't shake. It didn't beg. It simply existed. The lead attendant's eyes narrowed. If you refuse to comply, we'll have to involve the captain. Involve. There it was, the escalation card. The same one pulled so easily, so quickly. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. The man instinctively rocked her, his hand moving in slow circles on her back. His heart pounded, but his face remained composed. He had learned a long time ago what visible anger cost men who looked like him. Across the aisle, a woman dabbed her eyes. She's just a baby, she whispered. The first attendant scoffed. Sir, you're making this harder than it needs to be. He looked up then, really up, meeting her gaze fully. No, he said. You are. The cabin felt smaller now, tighter. Like the air itself had thickened. The lead attendant spoke again, quieter but firmer. We can either resolve this peacefully, or we can relocate you to economy for the remainder of the flight. Relocate you to economy. Several passengers audibly inhaled. That's not fair, someone said. You can't do that, another voice added. The man didn't respond immediately. He looked down at his daughter, at the faint redness beginning to show through her hairline. His jaw clenched not in anger but restraint. He reached into his pocket again. This time, he didn't type. He pressed call. The phone vibrated once, twice, connected. Yes, he said softly, turning slightly away from the attendants. They've escalated. The lead attendant frowned. Sir, who are you calling? The man didn't answer. He listened instead, nodding once. Proceed, he said, and keep the line open. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and lifted his eyes. Now, he said calmly, we wait. 2R. The attendants exchanged a look, confused, irritated, faintly uneasy. The plane cruised on, smooth and steady, but the balance inside that cabin had already begun to shift. The silence didn't last. It never does when too many people have seen the same wrong, and no one wants to carry it alone. From 2 rows back, the man who had been filming lowered his phone just enough to be heard. That's not what happened, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the tension. She spilled the coffee. On the baby, we all saw it. Every eye shifted. The lead attendant turned slowly, his expression tight. Sir, please remain seated. The man didn't sit. He didn't raise his phone higher either. He just stood there, steady. I am seated. I was seated. And I saw everything. A murmur rippled through first class, low and unmistakable. Agreement, recognition. A woman across the aisle leaned forward, her hands gripping the armrests. He didn't do anything wrong, she said. He's been calm this entire time. The first attendant scoffed, a sharp sound that landed wrong. Ma'am, we're trained professionals. Please don't interfere. Interfere with what? The woman shot back. You burned his child. That word burned hung heavy. The lead attendant lifted a hand, trying to regain control. Let's keep emotions out of this. We're handling it. No, another voice said. This one softer, younger. A junior flight attendant, barely out of training by the look of her, stood frozen near the galley entrance. She'd been quiet since the spill, eyes darting between her colleagues and the baby. Now she took a small step forward. I saw it too, she said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. The cup slipped. It wasn't his fault. The cabin went still. The lead attendant stared at her. This is not the time. Yes, it is, she interrupted, surprising even herself. Her shoulders squared. We're supposed to report incidents accurately. The first attendant turned on her sharply. "You're out of line." But the line had already shifted. Phones rose again, not aggressively but deliberately, not for spectacle, for record. The father watched it all quietly, his daughter finally asleep against his chest, exhaustion winning over pain for the moment. He hadn't asked anyone to defend him. He hadn't looked around for allies. They came anyway. A man near the window spoke up. "You can't punish him because you messed up." Another added, "If roles were reversed, this wouldn't even be a conversation." The lead attendant's jaw worked as he scanned the cabin, realizing something had changed. This was no longer one passenger versus crew. It was a room full of witnesses. "We need to de-escalate," he said again, but the words sounded thinner now, less certain. The first attendant crossed her arms tighter. "Sir," she said to the father, pointedly ignoring everyone else, "we can resolve this quickly if you cooperate." The father finally shifted his gaze back to her, calm, unblinking. "I've been cooperating," he said. "I just won't accept being blamed." For the first time, there was no immediate retort. The junior attendant swallowed hard. "We should file an incident report," she said quietly, "and call for medical guidance. That's protocol." Protocol. The lead attendant hesitated. Just a beat too long. The man filming lifted his phone again, not hiding it now. "This is already on record," he said, "whether you write it down or not." The woman across the aisle nodded. "So is mine." The cabin felt like a courtroom now, not loud, not chaotic, just alert. The first attendant's confidence began to crack around the edges. "You're all overreacting," she snapped. "It was an accident." The father didn't respond to her. He adjusted his grip on his daughter instead, checking her temperature with the back of his hand. Then he spoke not to the crew, but to the room. "She didn't apologize," he said simply. "She blamed my child. No embellishment, no accusation, just truth." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. The lead attendant cleared his throat, glancing toward the cockpit door. "I'm going to speak with the captain." "Please do," the father replied. That was the moment. The moment the lead attendant realized he was no longer in control of the narrative. As he turned away, the junior attendant caught the father's eye. Just for a second, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not defiance, recognition. The father nodded back once. And as the cockpit door closed behind the lead attendant, the cabin waited united now not by class or seat number, but by the shared understanding that something irreversible had already begun. Time stretched thin in first class. The captain hadn't returned yet. The lead attendant hadn't either. What remained was a charged stillness, every passenger alert, every movement magnified. The first attendant stood rigid near the aisle, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The confidence she'd worn earlier had hardened into something sharper, now defensive, brittle. She glanced at the sleeping baby, then back at the father. "Well," she said loud enough for the cabin to hear, "since she's finally calm, there's no reason for all this drama." Drama. The father's jaw tightened. He didn't look up right away. He gently adjusted his daughter's blanket, careful not to wake her, then lifted his eyes. "She's not calm," he said. "She's exhausted." The attendant rolled her eyes. "Sir, we've offered solutions. You're refusing all of them." "What solutions?" a woman snapped from across the aisle. "Moving him? That's not a punishment," the attendant shot back. "It's a practical response." Practical. The father felt it then, the familiar pressure behind his ribs. Not rage, something colder. He'd felt it before, years ago, standing in a different airport, holding a different boarding pass, being told to wait while others passed freely. A memory surfaced uninvited. He was younger then, alone, suit too simple for the room. A security officer had smiled politely and said, "Just a few questions." Those few questions had taken an hour. He'd missed the meeting, missed the deal. Back then, silence had cost him. Now, silence was a choice. The attendant stepped closer, lowering her voice as if that made it reasonable. "Sir, if you don't relocate voluntarily, we'll have no choice but to involve security upon landing." Security. The word snapped something loose in the cabin. "That's outrageous," someone said. "You're threatening him now," another voice added. The father stood a little straighter, not aggressively, deliberately. "Don't," he said quietly. The attendant frowned. Don't what? Don't escalate something you already mishandled. Her lips parted, offended. I didn't mishandle anything. The father looked around the cabin at the phones, the faces, the witnesses who hadn't looked away, then back at her. You spilled hot coffee on my child, he said evenly. You blamed her. You blamed me. You refused medical assistance. And now you're threatening security. Each sentence landed like a marker, clear, unavoidable. The attendant scoffed. You're twisting this. No, the junior attendant said softly from near the galley. He's not. All eyes turned to her. She swallowed, hands trembling slightly at her sides. We're trained to apologize first, to assist. None of that happened. The first attendant spun on her. You need to stop talking. BDOs. The junior attendant didn't move. Or what? The cabin inhaled as one. The first attendant turned back to the father, face flushed now. You think you can stand there and lecture us? You think this is how things work up here? Up here? The words slipped out before she could stop them. The father's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. The room felt it. This isn't about where we are, he said calmly. It's about how you treated us. Thanks for watching. She shook her head, laughing once, sharp and humorless. You people always make everything bigger than it needs to be. Silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that exposes everything. The man filming whispered, Did she really just say that? The father closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, his voice was steady but lower now. Say that again, he said. The attendant didn't. She looked away instead, jaw clenched, pride warring with fear. That was the breaking point. The father reached into his pocket again, not hurried, not dramatic, and pulled out his phone. He didn't raise it. He didn't point it at anyone. He simply unlocked the screen. Proceed to next phase, he said quietly into the call. The junior attendant's breath caught. The first attendant stared at him, confusion creeping in. What are you doing? She demanded. The father slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at her. Waiting, he said. The cockpit door opened. And this time, the captain wasn't alone. The cockpit door opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. The captain stepped out first tall, composed, his uniform crisp, but there was a second figure behind him, a senior crew supervisor, tablet in hand, eyes already scanning the cabin, taking in the phones, the faces, the tension that had nowhere left to hide. The lead attendant straightened instantly. The first attendant did too, though a half-step slower. Captain, she began too quickly. We have a non-compliant passenger. Stop, the captain said calmly, holding up one hand. Just that. One word. The cabin fell silent. He turned his attention not to the attendant, but to the man holding the child. His gaze lingered there a moment longer than protocol required, long enough to see the coffee stain, long enough to see the baby's flushed skin, long enough to understand this wasn't turbulence. Sir, the captain said evenly, are you and your child all right? The first attendant's head snapped toward him. The father answered without emotion. My daughter was burned by hot coffee. I asked for assistance. I was blamed instead. No commentary, no anger, just sequence. The supervisor tapped her tablet once. We have multiple passenger recordings time-stamped, she said, and a pending incident log. The first attendant stiffened. Those videos don't show the full context. Way? In this reason, ways. The supervisor didn't look up. They usually do. A murmur rippled through first-class quiet, restrained, but unmistakably satisfied. The captain nodded slowly. I'm going to need a clear account from everyone involved, he said. The first attendant stepped forward, eager now. It was an accident. I apologized. You didn't, the junior attendant said quietly from the galley. All eyes turned. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't apologize for speaking. She simply stood there, hands at her sides, spine straight. You didn't apologize, she repeated. You blamed him. The first attendant stared at her, disbelief cracking into anger. You're mistaken. No, the junior attendant replied. I was standing right there. The captain looked between them, then back to the father. Sir, he said again, more carefully this time, may I ask, have you contacted anyone regarding this incident? The father nodded once. Yes. The captain hesitated. Just a beat. Who? he asked. The father didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his daughter's position, ensuring her head was supported, her breathing steady. Then he looked up. "My executive office," he said calmly. The word hung there, ambiguous, enough to shift posture, not enough to reveal anything yet. The supervisor's fingers paused over her tablet. The first attendant let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Executive office?" she said. "Sir, this is a flight, not a boardroom. Anyone's. Thanks for watching." The father met her gaze. You'd be surprised how often the two overlap. The captain studied him now, not suspicious, not dismissive, curious. The supervisor's tablet chimed softly. She glanced down, then froze. Her expression didn't change dramatically. No gasp, no widened eyes, just a subtle stillness, as if the air had thickened around her. "Captain," she said carefully, turning the screen toward him, "we just received a priority escalation." The captain leaned in. His brow furrowed slightly as he read. The cabin waited. The first attendant crossed her arms again, forcing a scoff. "This is ridiculous." The supervisor didn't look at her. This escalation came from corporate. That word landed differently. The captain straightened slowly. "Corporate?" "Yes," the supervisor replied, flagged as time-sensitive. The first attendant opened her mouth, then closed it again. The father said nothing. He didn't need to. The captain looked at him now with a different weight in his eyes. "Sir," he said, choosing his words carefully, "for clarity, may I confirm your identity?" The father nodded once. "You may." The supervisor turned the tablet fully toward the captain, then angled it slightly, just enough for the lead attendant to see. Whatever was on that screen drained the color from his face. The first attendant noticed. "What?" she snapped. "What is it?" No one answered her. The supervisor spoke instead, her voice measured but firm. "We're moving this to protocol review. Effective immediately." The cabin exhaled as one. The captain turned back to the father. "Sir," he said, "thank you for your patience." Patience. The word sounded different now. Respectful. Earned. The father gave a small nod. "We're not done yet," he said quietly. And for the first time since the spill, the balance of power in that cabin had unmistakably shifted. The cabin had gone unnaturally quiet. Not the polite quiet of first-class etiquette, but the kind that settles when people realize they're standing at the edge of something irreversible. The supervisor straightened, tablet held close to her chest now, as if it carried weight. Because it did. "Captain," she said, voice low but precise, "this passenger is flagged under executive authority." The first attendant frowned. What does that even mean? No one answered her. The captain looked at the father again, this time without assumption, without posture, just assessment. "Sir," he said carefully, "for our records, could you please state your name?" The father took a slow breath. He shifted his daughter gently, making sure she was secure, then lifted his head. His voice didn't rise. It didn't perform. "My name is Marcus Hale," he said. "I'm the majority shareholder and acting chairman of this airline." It didn't land like a shout. It landed like gravity. For half a second, no one moved. Then the first attendant laughed a short, brittle sound that died almost immediately. "That's not funny," she said. Marcus didn't look at her. The supervisor tapped her tablet once, then turned the screen outward, not theatrically, just enough. A corporate profile, a photo, a title, ownership percentages highlighted in clean, unforgiving text. The lead attendant's face drained of color. The captain's posture changed instantly. Shoulders squared, tone sharpened not upward but inward. "Sir," he said, now fully composed, "I apologize for how this situation was handled." Marcus met his eyes, calm, unblinking. "You should," he replied. The first attendant took a step back. This can't be right," she stammered. "Why wouldn't we know who you are?" Marcus finally looked at her. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said evenly. "You just needed to treat my child like she mattered." 18. The retold. And the con. The words hit harder than any accusation. A woman in the aisle whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else murmured, "I knew it." The man who had been filming lowered his phone slowly, reverently, like he'd just witnessed a verdict being read. The supervisor spoke again, voice firm now. "This incident has been logged under executive review. All statements, recordings, and crew conduct will be evaluated immediately. The first attendant shook her head, panic setting in. It was an accident. I didn't mean distracted. You meant every word you said after? Marcus replied quietly. The cabin felt smaller now, not because of fear, but clarity. Marcus adjusted his daughter again, brushing his thumb gently across her shoulder where the coffee had spilled. You spilled hot coffee on my child, he said, his voice low but unmistakably firm. Then you mocked me, in an aircraft I own. Silence followed. Not disbelief. Recognition. The captain nodded once, decisively. We're initiating corrective action, he said. Effective immediately. The first attendant's knees seemed to buckle slightly. Wait, she said. Please. I didn't know. Marcus cut her off with a look alone. That, he said, is the problem. The supervisor turned to the lead attendant. You're relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. Then to the first attendant. And you are suspended pending investigation. Gasps rippled softly through the cabin, not shock, but release. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply held his daughter and looked out across the cabin, meeting the eyes of the people who had spoken up, the ones who hadn't looked away. This wasn't about power, he said quietly. It was about dignity. The captain inclined his head. We'll have medical staff meet the aircraft upon landing, and your family will be personally attended to. Marcus nodded once. Good, he said, because this conversation isn't over. And off to wars. And as the plane continued its steady path through the sky, everyone in that cabin understood one thing with perfect clarity. They hadn't just witnessed a reveal. They had witnessed a reckoning. The shift happened without noise. No raised voices. No arguments. Just systems moving quiet, efficient, irreversible. The supervisor stepped aside, tapping rapidly on her tablet. Names appeared. Status indicators changed color. Green to yellow, yellow to red. Access revoked. The lead attendant swallowed hard as his earpiece chimed softly. He touched it instinctively, then froze. Whatever he heard drained the last of the authority from his posture. Yes, he murmured. Understood. He looked at Marcus, then down at the floor. The first attendant stood rigid, arms slack at her sides now, the confidence she'd worn earlier nowhere to be found. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then stopped herself, finally understanding that there was nothing left to say. The captain addressed the cabin, voice calm and controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're handling a crew matter internally. Please remain seated. Remain seated. This time, the words carried no threat. Two senior crew members arrived quietly from the rear of the cabin. No rush, no spectacle. One stood beside the first attendant. The other gestured gently toward the aisle. Ma'am, one of them said, professional and final, please come with us. Guide, Mex is not heaven. The first attendant looked around, eyes darting at the phones, the faces, the witnesses who had seen everything. She searched for sympathy. Found none. This is ridiculous, she whispered. I didn't even know who he was. Marcus didn't respond. The supervisor did. And that, she said evenly, is precisely why this is happening. The attendant's shoulders slumped as she was escorted away, disappearing behind the galley curtain that had once felt like protection. A soft exhale moved through first class. Not applause, not celebration. Relief. The lead attendant followed moments later, his badge handed off, his role dissolved mid-flight. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply walked, a man realizing too late that silence had a cost. Marcus remained standing, his daughter still cradled against him. A medical professional off duty, seated further back, approached gently. I'm a pediatric nurse, she said quietly. May I take a look? Marcus nodded immediately. Please. She examined the baby's shoulder carefully, her expression tightening with concern but not alarm. It looks superficial, she said. Painful, but treatable. Ice and ointment should help. Thank you, Marcus replied. The captain watched this exchange, then turned back to Marcus. Sir, he said, voice steady, we've notified ground medical services. They'll be ready when we land. Indonjay. Marcus inclined his head once. Good. Thanks for watching. With my batter. The supervisor closed her tablet and addressed him directly now. An internal investigation has already been initiated. Crew statements, passenger footage, and system logs are being archived. She paused. This will not disappear. Marcus met her gaze. It shouldn't. Around them, passengers began to settle back into their seats. Not because the moment had passed, but because justice had taken shape. Solid, tangible. The man who had been filming lowered his phone fully now. "Thank you," he said quietly, not sure why he felt the need to say it. Marcus looked at him. "For what?" "For speaking up," the man replied. Marcus shook his head slightly. "You spoke up. I just stayed still." The junior attendant approached hesitantly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Sir," she said, voice soft but resolute, "I logged everything. I told the truth." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "That matters," he said. "More than you know." Therization. She swallowed, eyes shining, and stepped back. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane continued its smooth ascent, the earlier tension replaced by something quieter, something heavier. Accountability. The supervisor made one final notation on her tablet, then closed it with a decisive click. "This incident," she said, more to the air than to anyone else, "is resolved." "Well," Marcus looked down at his daughter, brushing his thumb gently across her cheek as she slept, unaware of the systems that had moved because of her pain. "Not resolved," he said softly. The supervisor met his eyes. "Corrected," she amended. And for the first time since the coffee spilled, the word felt accurate. The cabin slowly returned to motion. Seatbelts clicked back into place. Screens flickered on again. The hum of the engine steadied into a familiar rhythm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at 30,000 feet. But everyone knew better. Marcus sat down at last, easing into his seat with care, his daughter still sleeping against him. Her breathing was even now, small, trusting. He adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, shielding the faint redness that would fade but never quite disappear from memory. The captain approached one final time, posture formal, voice lowered out of respect rather than protocol. "Mr. Hale," he said, "on behalf of the airline, I'm sorry." Marcus looked up. His expression wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It was settled. "I accept responsibility," the captain continued. "But more importantly, this will be addressed systemically. Training, oversight, accountability." Marcus nodded once. "Good," he said, "because apologies don't mean much without change. Now, with now, the captain inclined his head and stepped away. Across the aisle, a woman caught Marcus's eye. She didn't smile. She simply pressed her hand to her chest and nodded an unspoken thank you. Others followed. Quiet acknowledgement. No applause. No spectacle. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a reckoning. The junior attendant passed by on her way back to the galley. She paused for half a second, then spoke softly. "Thank you for not backing down." Marcus met her gaze. "Thank you for speaking up," he replied. "Remember that." She nodded, taller somehow than she'd been before. The man who had filmed earlier leaned back in his seat, phone dark now. He whispered to no one in particular. "That's how it's done." Marcus heard him anyway. He looked down at his daughter again, at the small crease between her brows, the way her fingers curled reflexively against his shirt. She would never remember this flight. Not the coffee, not the voices, not the moment the world showed its teeth. But he would. And so would everyone else in that cabin. He rested his head back against the seat and closed his eyes, not in exhaustion but release. Not because the fight had drained him, but because it hadn't required fighting at all. When he spoke again, it wasn't to the crew, or the captain, or the witnesses. It was to the truth itself. "I didn't raise my voice," Marcus said quietly. "I raised the standard." No one interrupted. No one needed to. Outside the window, the sky stretched endless and indifferent, clouds parting beneath the wings of an aircraft that carried more than passengers now. It carried consequence, memory, change. This wasn't about ownership. It never was. It was about dignity, what happens when it's challenged, and what happens when it's defended without noise. The plane continued forward, steady and unshaken. And somewhere deep within the systems that governed its policies, protocols, peoples, something fundamental had shifted. Not because a man demanded respect, but because he refused to accept anything less.